start by having Lieutenant Governor Brian Cayley come up with some opening comments. Brian?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank everybody for being here. I wish you could meet under better circumstances than this. I want to recognize a couple of things. First of all, is PFAS is an emerging contaminant where science is still being developed. But we've assembled a panel of experts here to provide as much information as we possibly can. This came about because of a statewide surveillance effort that was launched here in Michigan, the first of its kind in the entire country. And the decision was made to proactively go out and test all public water systems and to do the same tests on small public water systems as large public water systems. And what we have seen happen under the worst of circumstances, what we've seen happen here, our communities and people come together at a level which is really quite remarkable, and I would even call it unique. When the test results came back and Parchment was contacted and the county got involved and the city of Kalamazoo got involved and the emergency declarations were made and went up through the whole process, including a state emergency declared. It allows for additional resources to be unlocked, but also for red tape and barriers to be eliminated for much quicker action than what you would otherwise see. And so you'll learn tonight about exactly where things are, and tonight is about about answering your questions. But I do want to give a big thank you to volunteers and community members and the emergency personnel at all these different levels of government that came together and have found a way to say yes, time after time after time. I have not seen a single territorial dispute between different entities in this case, and so I want you to, from a person who doesn't happen to live in this community, I want to share with you really how special that is in a situation like this, how important it is, and how much quicker things have moved because of that. And with that, I'd like to introduce your Congressman, Fred Upton.
Well, thanks, everybody. I want to echo what Brian said. Particularly, I want to give a shout out to Sheriff Fuller. I've spent a lot of hours in that EOC, the Emergency Operating Center, over the last number of days and through the weekend, and he has really made Team Kalamazoo, all of us, very proud of that operation to make sure that the information was disseminated as quickly as we could, and that the resources are there to, on both a short-term and a long-term basis. I want to also thank the Parchment Panther football team. I don't think we needed a lift truck to get 12 semis unloaded. I know that we've got more scheduled to come, thanks in large part to Margaret O'Brien and what she was able to identify to come in and help. But let me just say a couple of things. We learned a lot from Flint. And sadly, we learned that the EPA then didn't share, they weren't as transparent as they should, as they knew about it for a good number of months. The congressman from Flint, Dan Kildee, and I worked together on legislation that President Obama signed that said when EPA is aware of these, they need to be involved day one, they need to report within 24 hours publicly to the community, and they need to work with the state on a plan to correct it. They did that here. We're delighted to have EPA here. I talked to the EPA administrator last week. They did what we asked them to do. Second big thing that we're asking, and a couple of weeks ago now, Dan Kildee and I did legislation. Dan Kildee and I did legislation, or we did a letter to the EPA. We don't know if the standard is right or not. 7 parts per trillion. But doggone it, we got to find out what it is. And if that number needs to be lower, it needs to be adjusted right away to get it to a lower number. That's going to happen. It's going to happen either by their own or new legislation to make sure that it happens. So I appreciate everybody being here. And I also want to say we're going to continue to learn from this experience. We're going to have hearings in the Energy and Commerce Committee when Congress goes back after Labor Day. We're going to have a Michigan witness. We're going to see what we learned from here. We're going to make sure that other states follow what we've done right here. Thank you. I want to introduce Mayor Bridger.
Okay, thank you. Hello everybody and welcome to this important town hall meeting. Unfortunately my big boy voice isn't as good as Fred's after all talking to folks in the open house, but thank you for attending that as well. I'd like to introduce Jeff Sorensen, who has been part of this as well. He is the supervisor for Cooper Township. Jeff? I'd also like to recognize many of the elected officials that are here today. Of course, you know of our Honorable Fred Upton here, but we also have State Senator Margaret O'Brien. We have, and I'm going to ask the body, the elected officials to wave or stand up when I'm done with the list because it's quite lengthy. We have Representative Beth Griffin. We have State Representative John Holy. We also have our Parchment City Commission are here. We have the Cooper Township Board of Commissioners, or board members. We have the County Commission Chair, Stephanie Moore, and our representative, Mike Seals, and other commissioners here. We have, of course, Kalamazoo County Sheriff Richard Fuller. We have, I know we have representatives from the city of Kalamazoo. I don't know if we have any elected officials, but we do have some Kalamazoo folks here. We have Kalamazoo Township, Don Martin, and some of his board is here. And if they're also Comstock Supervisor Randy Thompson, I think he might have some of his board here. And if there's anybody else that I failed to recognize, I apologize, but there's a lot of folks, like maybe some Richland folks are here. But again, thank you for all being here, elected officials. Folks, we're in this together. We've been drinking the same water you have. I've raised my family drinking Parchment water. And last Thursday evening, upon learning of the test results that showed high levels of PFAS in our municipal water supply, action was immediate. Notification and providing safe drinking water became the priority. This rapid response would not have been possible without the incredible, and I say incredible, collaborative effort between the state, county, and local officials, especially the city of Kalamazoo, for stepping up with an alternate water solution until this matter is resolved. A special thanks to the many volunteers who have helped and are helping with the water distribution effort, including Boy Scouts, Salvation Army, Red Cross, several local high school students and athletic teams, in particular Parchment High School for use of their facility, staff, and football team. And most importantly, thank you to the residents and businesses of the city of Parchment and of Cooper Township for your support and cooperation through this crisis. Let's continue that tonight. We have assembled, as Congressman, or I think as Lieutenant Governor Kelly indicated, we've assembled a team of expert professionals to address our concerns. These are our concerns. So to start that off, I would like to introduce Mr. Jim Rutherford, who is the health officer for the Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services. He will be the MC for tonight's meeting. Jim?
Can you hear? Okay. Again, I'm the health officer, Jim Rutherford, with the Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services Department. And I want to welcome you all to this meeting, a very important meeting that we're here to hopefully answer your questions, the ones that we can. So with that, I want to take a shout out to thank the Haven Church and Pastor Gilbert. Where are you at, Pastor Gilbert? Thank you. For us to be able to assemble a meeting that can accommodate 1,000 people, they just were very grateful. We have some objectives this evening that we want to try to accomplish. I want to start out by asking people, can you raise your hand if you are impacted as a result of, you have water from the city of Parchment's water system? Please raise your hand. Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to tell you right now, this meeting is for you. We want to make sure that we're here to address your questions, hear your comments, and hopefully give you the chance to walk away with the understanding that we're going to try to answer your questions, and if we don't have an answer for your question tonight, we're going to make sure that we find out an answer for your question. We know that this has been very impactful for you. We know that it's very anxiety-ridden. We know that it's scary for a lot of you that have lived here a long time or lived here a short time. And the fact that you've been ingesting this water for that amount of time is concerning to you, but hopefully we're here to resolve some of those concerns. We want to talk to you. We've got a panel of experts here that have been intimately involved with this process from the beginning. We want to be able to tell you what we've done, what we're doing, and what we're going to do. With that, we're going to hopefully spend some time, and what I want to be able to emphasize is the takeaways. So we're going to spend time throughout their presentation to talk about, again, what they've done, but just as important to that is what we plan on doing in the future. The vast majority of this meeting is set up for you to be able to ask questions. And we are limiting that at this point in time to residents within the city of Parchment and within Cooper Township that have been impacted. We're doing that because we want to allow for enough time for those that are impacted to be able to ask questions and express their concerns. It's important that we keep this meeting as productive and informative as possible. Again, we want to ensure that we answer your questions. We've got a couple of housekeeping items that we want to talk about, and then we're going to start the presentation. The presentations are going to be, each of these officials will be, and they're representing the state health department, the DEQ, local. They're going to be talking about their areas of expertise and how that impacts the incident. After their presentation, we're going to have questions and answers. Now, we have two ways to go about doing the questions and answers. In your pews, there are these white sheets here, these index cards. Please, if you want to do a written question, you can do that, and there'll be people collecting these. So you'll have plenty of time, don't rush. As you go through and listen to the presentation, it might invoke a question for you, or you may have a question that you know that you want to ask right now. We're going to get to as many of these as we can. We're going to split the time up between 45 minutes of time spent answering these questions, and hopefully if we get them in time, and I'll signal when it's time to get your last question in, people will collect them, and we're going to get them up there so that they can be projected on the overhead. The other part of the meeting will be actual verbal questions. And again, we're limiting it to residents that are impacted. If you're interested in speaking at the microphone, and that'll be towards the end of the meeting, there'll be these, and if we have people that can, if you turn to the back of you, the individuals that are waving the yellow folders, just see them. All we're asking you to do is just write down your name and your address to verify residency. So a couple of other things. We want to make sure that we're courteous and respectful this evening. These people and their support staff are here. They didn't cause this problem, but they're here to help fix this problem. They have been working around the clock. Many of them are on very little sleep since Thursday night, so please be respectful. After the presentations, we'll have plenty of time for questions and comments. Each of the questions are going to be limited to 3 minutes. So right now I'm going to begin to transition into the presentations, and I'm going to introduce you all collectively, and then we'll have them come up each at a time. So Mark Ducharme, Mark, raise your hand. Mark Ducharme is from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and he's going to provide us an overall PFAS update. Chris Bush is joining us from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and she's going to provide an update from the State Health Department. Dr. Will Nettleton is our local medical officer with the Kalamazoo County Health Department, and he'll be providing some local perspective as it relates to public health issues. James Baker is the director of the water utility with the city of Kalamazoo, and he's got some updates relative to the water system at the city of Kalamazoo. And then finally, Brian Ergang is going to provide an update regarding the water distribution. Off to their side are, again, many of their staff. They have a staff from the state and local public health. There may be an epidemiologist or a toxicologist over there, so if you stump the panel, that's their friend that they're going to call for support. So now we're going to begin the process, or the actual presentation. You can follow each of the speakers. Some of them have PowerPoint presentations. You can follow that on the screen above. Again, we'll hold all questions until the questions and answers. So we're going to get started out with Mark Ducharme.
Thank you, Jim. So one of the things we're going to do tonight while we're here is this is an opportunity for us to come and talk to you about what are PFAS and be able to answer the questions and help inform you on some of the things that we've done over the past few days. So what are PFAS? PFAS are, I'm going to talk about the compound name and I won't talk about it again. They're perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These include perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA, and perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, which are PFOS. The reason we mentioned the three acronyms we use are PFAS, PFOA, and PFOS. And after that, that's how we'll talk about it. So in recent years, we've become concerned about PFOA, or excuse me, about PFAS. We've developed that these things have a concern in the environment and they have a concern in human health. And I'm not going to talk about the health part too much. We've got other people that will get into the health part. But we want you to know that there's a whole lot more we need to learn about PFAS. And we're just beginning to understand these, something about PFAS now. The science is emerging. Lieutenant Governor Calley mentioned that it's an emerging contaminant. It means we don't know a lot about it yet, but we're rapidly trying to learn. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what do we use PFAS for? PFAS was used in a variety of uses around the country. And these are things that have made our life more convenient, more simple in our days. So they were used in aerospace industry. They were used for putting out certain fires. So sometimes you hear the term AFFF, which is a firefighting foam that's used to put out fuels. Textiles, things like Scotchgard. So just simple little things to be able to protect fabrics and make them waterproof and oil-proof. When we get into here, one of the ones I want to be able to mention here specifically in this area, we're still trying to learn where the PFAS came from, but it was also used in paper-making industry in some cases. And these were used for coatings on papers. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what is an emerging contaminant? An emerging contaminant is a contaminant. These are chemicals and materials that can enter into the environment, can enter into water. And again, we're trying to learn some of the science on these chemicals now. They don't have a lot of peer-reviewed science information yet. You heard Congressman Upton talk about that. We don't have that science that's really well documented at this point. There's a lot of effort being done in that area. And then standards and regulations are generally not put in place yet. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So one of the things we want to talk about now is Michigan's leadership role. As Michigan has taken a leadership role, we're one of the first states in the nation to develop cleanup criteria or standards for PFAS in groundwater that's used for drinking water. Michigan has become a leadership state, and we took that leadership role to protect the citizens of the state of Michigan. And right now, we lead the nation with 34 confirmed sites where PFAS has been found. What I want to talk about that is it doesn't mean necessarily Michigan has more PFAS sites than everybody else. It's just that we have taken a leadership role to go out and find those sites. and so we're at 34 as we speak. So one of the things Governor Rick Snyder did was he established MPART, or the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. This was done to be able to take swift action, to be able to understand where are PFAS in the communities, and it was done to be able to protect public health throughout Michigan. And so this was, one of the things that they did here was we looked at where people are using water. So one of the things that MPART did was the governor wanted to task this MPART with going out and identifying all of the community water systems in schools that have their own type 2 water supply wells in the state of Michigan. And that's how we got to where we are today. So the Parchment water supply system was tested through this effort. And on late Thursday, well actually Thursday afternoon, I think it was about 3:30, 4 o'clock, so fairly late in the afternoon, we learned of the PFAS that was in the Parchment water system, in the water supply wells. And the important part here is, this is why I mentioned PFOS and PFOA. Their combined levels were detected above the lifetime health advisory of 70 parts per trillion in the Parchment water supply wells. If we could go to the next slide, please. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly walk through where, I think you guys can see this. You should be able to see it. There's 3, and I apologize, I'm going to turn around here and point at a couple of things just to make sure you see what we want to show you. This is Cooper Township up here, and we're in the city of Parchment. This is the supply wells. So just want to be able to orient you to that location. The Kalamazoo River is actually flowing this way, so we're looking north as we go up. If we could go to the next slide, please. What this polygon represents, the big dark line all the way around here, is this dark line represents the area where the Parchment water system is located. So this is where, if you're connected to the Parchment water system, this is the boundary that we've laid out. Now there's a couple of small adjustments that aren't shown on here yet, which is, I believe, right in here, where there's relatively new subdivision. If we could go to the next slide, please. Now what that circle is showing, that shaded circle that just pops up in here, that is a 1 mile radius that goes around, so it's 1 mile in all directions around the water supply wells. Why did we put that on there to show you? Part of the reason we showed you that is that there are people in the Parchment area that also drink their water from their own private drinking water wells. So when we're trying to understand the problem here, we're also looking at private drinking water wells, not just the Parchment water supply system. So we're trying to take a comprehensive overview of the area so that we can protect public health and understand what's going on. So if we can go to the next slide. Now this pink oblong shape that we just showed on a figure here, this is Parchment's water system's wellhead protection zone. So this is an area where where Parchment wanted to protect against certain activities that could impact water. So these are areas, an example, they didn't want to allow siting a factory or something to that effect, where something could get discharged into the ground that could impact their water. So why I throw those up there is we're going to talk about this a little bit, because what I want to communicate is, since we found out about this problem on Thursday, we wanted to take the necessary actions in a swift manner to be able to best protect public health in the Parchment and Cooper Township areas. And so it's important for us to recognize this area, this bigger area, as well as where might our biggest potential concerns be. So if we go to our next slide, please. What these arrows are showing, I'm going to highlight them a little bit because they may be difficult to see. These are arrows that point this way, point this way, point this way. That's on the west side of the Kalamazoo River. And these arrows are going this way, and this way, and this way, going east into the Kalamazoo River. What we're trying to show here is that we took a look at what we know regionally. So in terms of from geologic records in southwest Michigan, and we found that the Kalamazoo River, it flows through a valley, and in that valley formation, groundwater flows to the river, is what the regional flow is. Why is that important? That's important when we're looking at a concern area, to be able to know Where might PFAS be? Where might PFAS come from that may be impacting, that is impacting the Parchment water supply system? And I'm showing you all these pieces of information because as we go, we're trying to show you the systematic approach we took to be able to understand the issue. So if we go to the next slide, please. Now we have lots of colored dots that just showed up. In this situation is on Saturday morning, the Department of Environmental Quality sent a team of water sampling, PFAS water sampling individuals out into the community to go out and knock on your doors. Some of you may have had your well sampled. And actually, I'm not going to call you out because I don't want out of your privacy concerns. But some of the people in this room have had their water sampled. And so the samples that show, or excuse me, the dots that are green, those green dots represent the homes where we have collected a sample from their well. The yellow dots are dots where we've gone out and we visited the homes, but we were not able to get a sample because somebody was either not home or otherwise unavailable. So if you have a door hanger, the department has left door hangers at your door where we've gone if we didn't make contact. If you have a door hanger hanging on your door, there's a phone number on there. Please call that number and we will make arrangements to come out and get your well tested. Those are the big dots that we really want you to understand, the green dots and yellow dots. So let me explain the strategy a little bit more, why we chose those. You can see all things on there. You can see the water, the black boundary around the Parchment water system. You can see the blue circle that represents the 1 mile radius around the impacted wells. And you can see the pink polygon or oblong figure that shows the wellhead protection zone. And you can see the Parchment wells on there, which are in blue. So what you see that most of those green dots and most of the yellow dots, they're in the area that falls within that 1 mile blue circle and within the pink wellhead protection zone. We're trying to take a strategic, coordinated, well thought out scientific approach to be able to take swift actions to understand where PFAS may come from and how it may be impacting the system, and understanding if your water is below the lifetime health advisory. If we could go to the next slide, please. What this slide is showing, it's hard to see on here, is that you see triangles. Okay, what those triangles are is, and I'm not going to talk too much about this activity because Mr. Baker with the City of Kalamazoo is going to talk about it, but when Kalamazoo connected their water supply on a temporary basis to Parchments, they began to flush the water system out. Those triangles represent locations in Parchment's water distribution lines where PFAS testing began yesterday. We're hoping, and that PFAS testing will continue on a daily basis until we start to receive results. We expect, we've requested and expect to receive results from the laboratory by the end of this week for the first samples. We go to the next slide, please. Now we're adding some more colors on it. We're adding to these, and these are difficult for you to see, but what we're looking at is there's a rectangle here. There's some different shaded figures that go over here. Those are on there to show you, one of the things that we did was we wanted to know where might PFAS have been made or used in the area around here. When we looked at this, and I think a lot of the people here that are in the community, they know exactly what I'm pointing at. This is, I remember we went back and said, where were PFAS used or made? One of those was in paper making industry. They may have used PFAS. We're not saying they did at this facility, but we're saying they may have based on what we've learned about PFAS. We went into our records that the Department of Environmental Quality has had for work that we've done in the past out here. We found that they have monitoring wells at this location. So today, we began to go out and sample the water that's in the monitoring wells at this location. What we hope to learn from that is we hope to learn a more current groundwater flow direction by measuring water level in those wells. We also hope to understand if this is where PFAS may have come from. So we expect those results those samples will be submitted for test results. Also, like I say, we're doing this in a systematic approach. We're doing it concurrent with testing the drinking water wells so that we're able to move forward in a coordinated, well thought out, structured manner. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what are we going to do next? One of the things we're going to communicate test results to the community as they are received. The samples that we've collected from your residential wells, where we began a testing activity Saturday, we've requested and expect to receive results from the laboratory beginning next week. As we get those results, we're developing a plan to communicate those to the public. We'll continue to test water chemistry, lead and copper, and PFAS in the Parchment water system. This is important to understand if the connection, the water that's coming from Kalamazoo to the Parchment water system is going to be below lifetime health advisory. We're going to flush service lines. Before we do that, you will be provided with instructions on when and how to flush whole house. So this is all the things in your house. This is the water that goes through your plumbing, the water that goes through your water softener if you have one, through your hot water tank, and various different appliances. So you will get instruction on that when the time is right. The slide, things are moving quickly. This morning, the Department of Environmental Quality provided a permit to the City of Kalamazoo to provide for a more permanent connection. A more permanent, still a temporary, but a more permanent connection to the Parchment water system. Right now, if you've been in the area, you can see it's being pumped through fire trucks. So that's what they're looking at, and they provided that permit, and Mr. Baker will talk about that. We're going to continue to test drinking water wells. We're going to continue to test monitor wells. And we're going to go out and begin testing surface water. Also, at the former paper plant, there were ponds and waste treatment areas where there were lagoons, if you will. Those there was water in those historically. If the water's still present, we're planning to sample that water. We'll begin that effort shortly. And those are our next steps. That is what we're focused on. And I think Mr. Rutherford mentioned toward the end, we'll be able to entertain questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Our next speaker is Chris Bush, and following her will be Will Nettleton, and both of them are going to address some public health considerations.
Thank you, Jim. As he said, I'm Chris Bush. I'm with the State Health Department in Lansing, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And there are several people with me today who can assist, and you probably already had the chance to talk with them during the public availability session. But we have been working on PFAS issues in the state since 2012, when the contamination was first found in the state by the DEQ sampling that was done up at the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Oscoda. So since that time, we have become involved at several other sites, including up to now Parchment. And the actions at our sites, at the sites that are in the state, have been proactive. This is not just about a number. This is not just about 70 parts per trillion, but we want to understand why your location is important and the location of where that source could be. That's some of the work that DEQ is doing to find out where the PFAS and Parchment came from and what we're going to be doing about that. Our actions are also immediate. when we see that there is a need to stop exposures that could be potentially harmful. We have worked with the local health departments in various areas, including here in Kalamazoo County, to provide bottled water and then also filters when we think that it's necessary to have these there as an interim measure while DEQ conducts the investigation and we determine what the long-term solution is going to be to fix this situation. And we act to be protective of public health. We, as I said, we don't just look at the 70 part per trillion, that's for PFOS and PFOA combined, but we look at the group of these chemicals that are analyzed for in these drinking water samples to get a feel for what it is telling us. So I wanted to start with that slide and then move into the next slide as far as what are the health effects that can be associated with exposure to these two chemicals for which there is a lot of information and which EPA felt confident about setting its lifetime health advisory. We'll talk a little bit about the lifetime health advisory in just a second. So some of the information that we have about these two chemicals and what health outcomes could happen come from studies in people where there have been cities or populations that have been exposed to this through their drinking water. And one of those major groups of people that was studied, an epidemiological study, was called the C8 study. And I'm guessing that some of you in the audience tonight have done your homework and started looking for information about these chemicals, so maybe you've read about this already. The C8 study occurred in a population, West Virginia and Ohio. The Ohio River divides those communities, and there was a DuPont, or there still is a DuPont facility along the river that ended up releasing these chemicals, primarily PFOA, to the river. And these communities obtained their drinking water from the river. So this was a long drawn-out issue. It's still going on, I'm sure, for these people as far as trying to determine what this means to them in the long run. They are off that water, thankfully. However, part of the resolution for the work done at this site was that there was a very scientifically conducted study of the health effects that people were experiencing and seeing if there was a connection to them drinking this water. So this list that's on the left side of the slide indicates some of the findings that were found. This was a group of 65,000 some individuals that were studied, got a lot of information from them, and then there were other human studies too, so this corroborated in some of this. But I'm going to read off some of those, some of the lists that we have up here. Higher cholesterol seems to be linked to exposure to these chemicals. Thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis, some people might call that irritable bowel syndrome. Testicular and kidney cancers have been associated with it. Changes to the immune system and high blood pressure during pregnancy, preeclampsia. So this was with the C8 study, the average concentration that these people were exposed to was 3,500 parts per trillion. So that is higher than what we have seen in the drinking water at Parchment. Just trying to let you know that that was their number. Now we also use animal studies to help us learn more about this, because we don't conduct studies on people. We use laboratory animals under controlled conditions. We know what the doses that they are getting, and we look very carefully for what kind of effects might show up in these animals that could be related to humans. So the animal studies have shown that exposure during pregnancy could sometimes alter what happened to the pups. So these are rodent studies, rats and mice. What happened to the pups as far as their paw development or their birth weight. And for some, it caused early puberty in some of the male pups. But we've also seen, like it was seen in some of the human studies, the immune system changes, and then changes in liver and kidney weight. So that gave us some information and gave EPA some information to develop their lifetime health advisory level, the 70 part per trillion. So the next slide, please. This is a lifetime health advisory. So if you were to go and have a drink of water that you didn't realize had PFAS in it at whatever level, it's not something that you would expect to get sick from right away. This is something that over the course of a lifetime that we would be concerned about for elevated exposures. The Lifetime Health Advisory looks specifically at PFOA and PFOS. And I think Mark described that this family of compounds, the PFAS, has a lot of different chemicals in it. These two, PFOA and PFOS, are ones that we know a lot of information about. There's a lot of studies on them in the lab and in people in populations that have had this in their drinking water. So they felt confident, EPA did, when they developed this lifetime health advisory. And I'll go through just a little bit of detail on that in the next slide. So it's 70 part per trillion, which is the same as nanograms per liter. For those of you who have had your well sampled or you're going to get it sampled, when you get your results back, it will be, the units that they show will be this Ng/L that you see on the slide. That's nanograms per liter. That's the same thing as parts per trillion when you're talking about a water concentration. This concentration was derived to be protective in the short term. Even though we're talking about a lifetime, we're also thinking about the fetus. So that is a short-term exposure, even though it's the lifetime of the fetus. It's 9 months in the womb. But also long-term or lifetime health exposures for children and adults. So it's meant to be protective of an unborn baby for developmental effects, and those were the changes that were noted in the animals, the changes in the paw and the body weight, and some other changes that have been noted. And should be protecting all people against cancer and non-cancer effects. So let's talk a little bit more about the development of these. And this slide and the next slide are very similar. So I will go through this slide a little more carefully, the next slide a little more quickly. So on the left of the slide, it talks about the lowest dose in an animal study that was able to cause an effect in the animal. Sometimes they find a dose that does not cause an effect, and that's helpful information to know too. So from there, that can be a very high amount. That's in an animal. That's often the case with laboratory studies. From there, the scientists developed what they felt was the appropriate human dose at that same level. So at this level in a rat or in a mouse in the lab, what does that equate to in a human dose? So that is where that second green bar comes into play. Now, with lab studies in animals, the animals are very much the same from animal to animal as far as their genetic makeup. But we look around the room tonight and we are all very different from each other. So this next step in developing what a lifetime health advisory is consider that there could be sensitive populations in the humans, so that we want to protect for what the most sensitive is. And if we're protecting for the most sensitive, then we are protecting for all. So in this case, we are protecting for the fetus, and that brought it down to what's you see at the bottom of that third column-ish. It says 350 ppt part per trillion. Now, the next step that was taken was in consideration that because these chemicals are so frequently used for everyday products that we use, that industry use, commercial enterprises use too, is that we can have exposure to other items that have these chemicals in it. That is the nature of our society. We are an industrial society, so chemicals are in our environment, and we have small amounts of everyday exposure to them. It's when we get into situations when there is a large source of exposure, like what we saw in the Parchment system, that we have to think about what that means. But on an everyday exposure level, about 20% is attributed, about 1/5 of it is attributed to water. So if we divide that 350 by 5, because it's 1/5, we come down to 70 parts per trillion. So what this slide is showing is that there is a great decrease from the effects seen in a laboratory study brought down to where an acceptable amount in the water is that would not be expected to cause harm to people. Now I'm going to have you go quickly to the next slide. It's very similar. Doses are slightly different at the beginning because the first slide was PFOA. This one was talking about PFOS, but the steps are essentially the same. Going from an animal concentration down to what that would be in a human, protecting for the most sensitive, and then figuring out what's called your relative source contribution, or that 1/5 amount. So coming down with a very protective number. Next slide, please. Before I let you go and get on to Dr. Nettleton's talk, I just want to let you know that the toxicologist who's going to be working on this site is not me, but she will be working with the community from here on out. Her name is Jordan Bailey. The best way to get a hold of us is to call our 800 number, because you may have questions for the toxicologist, or maybe you want to talk about fishing in the area or hunting in the area or whatever, and we can direct those calls to the best staff to give you an answer for that. And sometimes that might not be in our department, it might be the Department of Agriculture, it might be the DNR that you want to talk to. So I mentioned fishing information. We've got our michigan.gov/eatsafefish. There's information there, and as we get fish sampled, more and more fish sampled throughout the state for PFAS, which is the one that's of concern in fish, we get that information onto the website and into our Eat Safe Fish guides. And then I want to put in a plug for the michigan.gov/PFAS response site. That is where the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, or MPART, keeps updating. So the slides from tonight's meeting will be there. Information about public water supplies that get tested throughout the state is going to be posted there. You'll learn about other sites, not just your own there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to some boring toxicology talk, but I will definitely be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A time. I'm going to turn it over to local health.
Good evening. My name is Dr. William Nettleton. I'm an assistant professor in family and community medicine at Western Michigan University Homer Stryker MD School of Medicine. I also serve as medical director for Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services. I don't have slides to share with you this evening. Rather, I hope to discuss and describe, one, the role of the local health authority, and two, to provide further context for the information you're receiving today. So first and foremost, the role of Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services is to protect the public's health. Second, we act as a liaison between our state partners, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and our local municipalities to you, the public, our community. Third, we interpret and we communicate potential health hazards that may present to our community. And last, we provide assessment and intervention for those potential health hazards, such as PFAS, in our community. I think it'd be helpful to describe the worldview of a scientist, of an epidemiologist for our discussion this evening. And in a nutshell, we seek to understand the relationship between exposure to a chemical like PFAS and an outcome or a disease or a health-related event. And that is really complicated. There are many factors that go into that relationship. To better understand that relationship, scientists perform studies in both animals and in humans that ask different questions. All of that information goes into an overall risk assessment that's presented at the federal level, reviewed at the state level, and then implemented on a local level in our community. And as you've heard this evening, the science surrounding PFAS is emerging, it's evolving, and therefore our recommendations and our interventions will be changing as well. And I think it's important to acknowledge the uncertainty surrounding PFAS, as often it is the case with other potential health hazards that present to the community. For example, the fact that an exposure may have occurred to a chemical like PFAS does not necessarily mean that a disease associated with PFAS has occurred or will ever occur. And that statement I just said is really unnerving. It's really frustrating to hear. And we at Health and Community Services are here to walk with you through this entire process, and we commit to providing further assessment and intervention for this potential health hazard in our community. Thus far, we at the local health department and the state health department have communicated to our local physicians. Your community doctors have received information regarding potential health effects for PFAS in our community. I will be available to provide answers and further descriptions to your questions that you may have about other specific health-related facts or concerns in our question and answer portion of tonight's program.
Thank you, Dr. Donaldson. Our next speaker is James Baker, and Mr. Baker is going to provide an update regarding the City of Kalamazoo's water system. James?
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. What we want to focus on discussion, explaining our response, the immediate response, and then the plan as we work through to flush the system out. As soon as we got a call about 6:30 p.m. at the city and said we have a problem with Parchment. We immediately deployed a response plan. We had over 50 personnel in public services and public safety mobilized immediately and got on site. Within 6 hours, at 12:32 a.m. Thursday morning, we had fresh City of Kalamazoo water flowing into Parchment. With that, we also protected the City of Kalamazoo water. We protected that against backflow from Parchment. All those protections were put in place to ensure the two water systems would be protected. We wanted to explain why it was so important for us to get here fast and get a water system going. When you have high densities within a populated area, you need a tremendous amount of water for fire protection. You had that fire protection within 6 hours. You also have sanitary needs. We wanted to make sure we could ensure the best quality of life for everybody as they work through this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a photo of just one of our connection points and a lot of the work that went into getting that water system connected over on a temporary basis. The temporary basis includes the use of fire apparatus. We started with 3 fire apparatus the first night. As we worked through and increased some of the connections. We installed some larger hoses, and we keep working on getting closer and closer and closer to a more permanent solution. We now are relying on only one fire apparatus. Next slide, please. Again, you can see the backflow preventers on the Kalamazoo hydrant. Next slide, please. So as we talk about moving towards a clean system, we had to get all of the parchment water out. We met with the DEQ, the Drinking Water Division, and detailed out a plan involving turning the valves in parchment, isolating the tower, draining the tower into the sanitary sewer, opening the valves back up, pumping new water in, and repeating that process. Once we had clean water in the tower, we then worked through a systematic process to start in the middle and work our way out, pushing all the parchment water out. We then worked with the Water Resources Division of the MDQ to see how we could best capture and treat that water and prevent it as best we could from going into the storm sewer systems. We created a storm sewer to sanitary sewer bypass plan, and we implemented that, and we were able to catch a majority of the water that was discharged during flushing operations. I will tell you that we did not catch all of it. Water from flushing operations did enter the storm sewers. We're aware of that. We also have engineering protection devices in place, pop-off valves, which protect the structural integrity of the existing parchment water tower. We're not operating with parchment system right now. We know their wells are shut off. We're now operating in your system with fire apparatuses, pressure gauges, turning of valves, and dedicated City of Kalamazoo staff keeping the entire system in order. In order to ensure that we don't put too much pressure on the water tower, we have pop-off devices which at a certain pressure will open up and allow water out of the system. With the system completely exchanged with water and completely flushed out, we were ready to start PFAS testing Monday morning. So in terms of timeline, within 72 hours of getting the initial call, City of Kalamazoo staff, working with City of Parchment staff, turned the system completely over, and we're ready for PFAS testing. In addition to this, we're doing a full range of chemistry testing, water quality testing, in cooperation with the DEQ Water Quality Division. Our lab is out every day grabbing samples to ensure that the chemistry between the two water systems is correct. The chemicals that we're putting in the water, such as chlorine to keep everybody protected, is correct, and that we're moving in the right direction. We expect PFAS test results from the City of Kalamazoo water in the parchment pipes as early as late Friday evening. Next slide, please. As we work through this system, we want to make sure that we're always moving forward and always getting ready to turn over a water system as soon as we're told we can do so. You see crews up now, right now, up on G Avenue. That construction started this morning. We were issued a Part 399 construction permit through the MDQ, and we worked with our engineers, worked with MDQ engineers to design a system that enables Parchment to have a choice moving forward with their decisions regarding water. Once that system is in place, the further and further we get with construction, we have less and less and less dependency on fire apparatus. It is our goal to get that fire truck out of here as soon as possible and return slowly to a more normal life as soon as we can. Next slide, please. So as we look at next steps, we're now ready for homeowners and business owners to begin service line flushing. If you came over and visited us at our table, we had a 3-page information packet for you. As we stated, we flushed the mains. Those mains have been clear since Monday, and we're now ready for you folks to flush out your private residences business, and everything else. A copy of this flushing procedures and instructions will be available to you. We plan to mail it to you. We plan to post it on the website, and we plan to be present in the community to hand it out. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And our final speaker on the panel is Brian Ergang. And Brian's going to give us an update relative to the water distribution that continues.
Good evening, folks. My team was tasked with organizing and establishing a water distribution point throughout the emergency crisis. Simply, what we're going to do is make sure that the people in the community who were affected by this had safe drinking water, and we supplied that drinking water in an effective, efficient manner. Our people really knew right from the beginning, our job was simple, and it was to make sure that you got your water as quickly as possible. To explain that to you a little bit more, I want to tell you about where we came from. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Baker already said, we convened in the Emergency Operations Center at 7 p.m. Everybody was moving very fast to try to come up with the best solution possible, and we divided out into teams. At 7:30 p.m., just shortly thereafter, Senator O'Brien was able to find 4 semi-trailers of bottled water in the city of Battle Creek. A few minutes later, we contacted Parchment Public Schools. We identified that location as being probably the best location for the distribution center for a couple of reasons. First, its central location in the community, it's well known. Second, it has a simple entrance and egress off G Avenue and Orient. It allowed for a simple flow of traffic. And then finally, the relationship that we had with the school from some previous events that we've had with them. Next slide. Sheriff Fuller, right after that, was able to find transport for that water from Battle Creek to Kalamazoo. 2 township officers were immediately dispatched to the school, where they secured both the entrance and the exit and the grounds of the school. We have maintained 24-hour security of that site since then. We will continue to do so. Next slide for me, please. At about 12:30 a.m., the two of the first trucks arrived with the water. 10,000 cases of water total in the 4 semis provided. At 2:30, officers from Kalamazoo Township set up cones and barricades to make that, if you've been through that system, a little bit more efficient and ready to go for the morning. At 6 a.m., first volunteers arrived and started unloading those semi-trailers by hand. And then at 6:30, we got our first people coming in from the community, and we started distributing water. So if I could take a moment just to tell you what an amazing response that is. In under 12 hours of being notified, we were able to get water on site and have it being distributed to the community. It was an amazing effort. Next slide, please. What happened at 8 a.m. was probably the most remarkable thing that I've seen in a long time. The servant leaders. The servant leaders from your community, your kids, unloaded 3 full semi-trailers by hand and put them out for distribution. Coach Hinton was absolutely amazing that day. Parchment Public Schools has been amazing. They've been an amazing host, and they've done so many things for us. If I can acknowledge your new superintendent, Jason Meisters, in the back. Jason's been on the job for about 5 days, so thank you. He's always been a remarkable person, and he's going to do great things for you. Judging by the responses that we've received from the community as you're driving through, and all the help that you're providing for your neighbors, I can tell you that this community is not a victim in this situation. You guys have shown a resiliency in your community that isn't willing to be victimized as you help yourselves. And I've never been more proud to be a part of the community than I have been the last 5 days. You are amazing. My video didn't delay, Lincoln. Okay. Next slide. This has been a collaborative effort. Many people have come together. Michigan State Police have been a tremendous help, as the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office, Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety. The Salvation Army has been out every day feeding us. American Red Cross has volunteers, and then the many organizations and sports organizations from across the community that have responded to help out and be good neighbors. Next slide, please. Distribution eligibility, this was a little bit difficult thing to get a grasp on. The first day, what we wanted to do was get as much water out as possible. We knew there was going to be some concern. We were very liberal with that, and we pushed out a lot of water that first day. What we know is that the people on the city of Parchment water line were definitely eligible, and then we worked really hard with DEQ and county health to identify those folks that are on wells. To see if they were eligible, and so they gave us, you saw earlier, the 1 mile radius that they drew around the well, the Parchment well. We expanded that on the third day to include another ½ mile on that, and if you visited me in the open house, you saw the list that we actually give the officers to use to verify addresses. So when you come in and then you tell us where you live, that's the actual sheet the officers have. If you haven't seen that yet, or if you don't have it, see me afterwards and I'll make sure that you get a copy of that as well. Next slide, please. So next up, I want to be very clear. We're here to help you and help the community and make sure that you have safe drinking water and make sure that it's in a safe place that you can access it until the municipal system is cleared and it's safe to drink your water again. I can tell you the state is doing great things. They have 2 more trucks of water arriving tomorrow. Those will be in at 9 a.m. or about. And they've told us that they're going to be delivering water every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday until we no longer need the water. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, we understand this is going to be a marathon. This is not a sprint. We also need your help too. Many of you have been out and volunteered. We're always looking for volunteers. Please call the water hotline or contact Shannon Stutz at the City of Parchment, and she can help coordinate that. And again, I thank you and commend you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Brian. That's a very tough act to follow, but go Panthers. Okay, so we're going to, one other group that I want to introduce, we do have representatives here from the Environmental Protection Agency. Ralph Dahlhaw, please raise your hand. And Jeff Kimball are here, and they're here. They've worked in this community before. Both of them were intimately involved throughout the oil spill that impacted both Calhoun County and Kalamazoo County, so they know the area very well. And Jeff Kimball is currently working with the PFAS incident in Kent County. So they're here too as experts and will be available afterwards for additional questions. So now folks, if you have a written question, this is last call for those. So if you've got one, please raise it and we'll get somebody to come and collect that. Okay, so now we're going to transition into the written question phase of the evening, and hopefully we are able to put up some of these questions. Now I did notice, and I kind of kept an eye on how many came up, and there's a lot of them. And I would assume that there's probably a lot of duplications, and we're trying to sift through those and identify what we believe to be the pertinent questions without a lot of redundancy. So with that, are we ready to start putting up some questions? So the first question is, 1, can people be tested for PFAS levels? 2, the impacts of those who lived in Parchment for 45 years and recently moved. How do we get to feel safe after we drank it for 45 years? And 3, how do we get necessary information to our out-of-town medical specialist? So I'm going to, as we get these questions, we're going to turn it over to your expert panel, and again, their phone a friend there in the wings. If their microphone is, Vern, we make sure that microphone is functioning. You don't have a microphone, okay, we'll get you a microphone. So who would like to field this first question? I think I'm going to send it first to Dr. Will Nettleton.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. So the first question, can people be tested for PFAS levels? A PFAS blood level will tell me as a clinician and you as a patient whether or not you have been exposed to PFAS or not. It will not tell us whether that exposure has caused a disease that you may have that's related to PFAS, or will ever cause a disease that may be related to PFAS. So from that perspective, a blood test for PFAS has very low clinical utility. So what do I mean by that? When I order a test as a physician, I do that most often to inform our decision-making, our shared decision-making as a patient. What next steps will we take with regards to that test result? And unfortunately, as a clinician, it doesn't guide me on what next steps to take, and it doesn't guide us as a doctor-patient relationship on informing, could this affect my health in the future, and did it affect my health in the past? It will only tell us at one point in time what that blood PFAS level may be. And that is with regards to an individual person's risk assessment. In some other communities, as you heard this evening about West Virginia, the C8 study, that was a community research study that had a specific research question that both scientists and community members wanted to answer. And at this point in time, we are still very early in our evidence gathering process. We still haven't determined really what the exposure is. So we don't have information to ask that research question at this time. That's my response to the first question, and I'll pass off the second question to our state toxicologist.
So the second question is about those people who have previously lived here and moved away. And that's a good question to ask, because I have heard that from other communities where people have left and they want to know, well, what was the level in the house that I used to live in? Or what was the level when I was living there? We can't go back in time and sample that. Based on the concentration that was found in the Parchment drinking water supply, it's probably been there for at least a few years. I do not know, I don't have that expertise to know when this started, what the levels were at the beginning, when they got to this level, and where this is coming from. So, as far as having that question and what the appropriate answer is to that, I think that probably the best advice that I can give would be to work with your medical provider and let them know this is the situation that I have heard about in a community where I used to live. And then that doctor, and you can go to the PFAS response website that I mentioned to aim you and your doctor into the right directions for information as far as whether, as a clinician, I think Dr. Nettleton can speak to this a little bit more, as far as whether they would be looking for certain health outcomes in you. I showed you that list on the slide, and the slides will be posted on the website, so you'll see that list again. And there's information that clinicians can get from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, from the CDC, to help guide what they would want to work with their patients on. And it might be, it just might be a matter of having this information in your file and something that they would keep track of. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Nettleton in case there's anything he wants to add or questions.
I'd ask that you hold questions. We got to keep it in an orderly fashion, so we'll address it again. If you want to ask questions that you didn't have a chance to write down, there's going to be another 45-minute section devoted to verbal questions. Dr. Nelson?
I agree what was just shared. And to the point number 3, how do we access additional information? 2 different sources I'd recommend. First and foremost, your personal physician, your primary physician. We at the local health department and the state health department have communicated our recommentions to physicians in our local community as well as in the statewide community surrounding this issue. And they know you best, and they know you. The second is that we as the local health authority consult with our state partners that I mentioned before, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, both in terms of our toxicology team and also in terms of our chief medical executive as well. And so these are our sources that we partner together, and for you as the community, your primary source is with your personal physician, and we are happy both at the local health department and the state health department levels to consult and provide further guidance.
Thank you. Next question, please. Next question is, I have chronic kidney disease in one kidney. What kind of issues and symptoms should I be aware of now and in the future? And how should these be reported? And 2, have there been any lung diseases identified?
I talked to some folks in our open house prior to this session. And a lot of folks are concerned about specific health concerns, some that are related to PFAS, and others just in general of concern, given some uncertainty that has been expressed here this evening. So one point in general, there's not a specific symptom that is related to exposure to PFAS. There are those health outcomes that we have found a link to that was listed by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and that is available, I believe, in your FAQs handout as well. That is also available on our state and local health departments website. So with regards to chronic kidney disease and having 1 instead of 2 kidneys, there's not a specific symptom to look for in the immediate moment. And there's not something in the future to be looking out for as well. In general, I recommend to follow up with your personal physician for your health maintenance exams, your annual physical exams. This is an opportunity for you to have a conversation with your personal physician. And there are some laboratory tests that you and your physician could consider in ordering. For example, a cholesterol test, a thyroid test, perhaps a liver test, and something called a uric acid test. And that really depends upon the decision-making between you and your personal physician and your past medical history. All of those tests that I just mentioned, unlike the PFAS blood level, all the tests that I just mentioned are well established within the medical community and have well established reference levels that can be interpreted appropriately by your personal physician. I'll have the second question answered by our state toxicologist.
Okay, the second question was whether or not any lung diseases have been identified and as far as being connected with exposure to these chemicals. And to my knowledge, to our knowledge so far, this has not been identified. What we are seeing more is liver effects and thyroid effects and the list that I showed earlier, but lung was not on that.
Thank you. Next question. One, will you be checking wells off Rollage Street wells? 2, what is the plan for individual private wells that are contaminated? And 3, how and where can citizens get well water tested and the cost associated with them? I assume who's going to cover that cost?
The first question, will we be checking wells off of Rollage Street? How we're approaching this is just to emphasize again, is we're using a very strategic approach for how we're sampling. A roll ridge, I'd have to look at a figure to see exactly where that is, but again, our focus is in the area that's closest to the Parchment water supply wells. We're focused within the overlap area, within the 1 mile radius, and in the wellhead protection zone. That doesn't mean that's where we're going to limit our work. That's our first work. That is the area we have to look at this systematically and understand where is our concern first, and then we move out based on results. So again, I mentioned that we expect, we requested and anticipated results next week. That will help inform our decisions, and we'll be able to provide more information to the community as the investigation proceeds. The plan, what is the plan for individual private wells that are contaminated? That is something that we are working on right now in coordination with the Department of Health and Human Services. We have a lot of diverse scientists that we need to get together in a room and start to develop our plan. We want to go develop that plan so that we are prepared when we receive results to quickly communicate that plan to the community. Right now, part I want to emphasize again is that very swiftly we were able to provide alternate water to people in the community so that there is water that they can drink while we're investigating this and figuring out what the problem is.
And I think to add to that, we've got probably 34, 35 of these sites in Michigan, and most of which are residential private wells. They've developed filtration units that we've employed successfully at some of these other sites, so there will be options upcoming for those situations.
And then the last question is, where can citizens get well water tested and the cost? At this point, what we're focused on providing and testing out in the community where we think there's impact. There are private labs. Right now, the labs that we're using is, we just recently, just this week, we sent samples to 2 different labs. There's not a lot of laboratories in the nation right now that are testing for PFAS. This is an emerging contaminant, and so there's still a lot of work that's being done to be able to do that from a chemistry standpoint. We are sending our samples out to California, and just this week we started to send our samples to a Michigan lab as well, so that we can compare results between the 2 laboratories. So the options are pretty thin, and we have sent an awful lot of samples all across the state to the laboratory in California. So laboratory capacity can become, when I say capacity, it's their ability to be able to analyze samples in a quick fashion. So for a private citizen, the cost is, they're expensive tests. They're in the several $100 range. And there's also the part about PFAS testing is that the sample has to be collected properly. So it's a little bit more difficult than just opening up the tap and collecting your water sample. PFAS, they were so widely used in our day-to-day lives historically, so that we can have PFAS, that we can actually contaminate a sample inadvertently. So we kind of encourage you, if you are doing testing, is that you find somebody that knows how to do the PFAS sampling, and that you use a lab that has been properly vetted and is qualified to be able to do PFAS analysis. But right now, we are trying to do that analysis so we can help you out with that.
So, Mark and/or Chris, I want you to expand upon a brief discussion relative to what a resident would do in the event that they're greeted at a door by someone that wants to sell them a filter or wants to draw a water sample and solve their problem for them.
I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at that because the samples that the DEQ has been collecting, and also some people who have been doing their own independent sampling and paying for it themselves, they typically come to the state health department for us to interpret and determine what needs to be done about that. Does somebody need a filter? Is it okay to drink? That sort of thing. As Mark mentioned, it is very easy to contaminate these samples. First off, they are measuring in very, very small units or amounts that they can measure in water. So it doesn't take much. I could have put on lotion that day or sunscreen and maybe not wash my hands or not wash them enough, or just have a little bit on my sleeve, or be wearing Gore-Tex or something where it could contaminate the sample with something that you're not concerned about. You're concerned about the water. So that is why we recommend that a qualified individual take the sample. Now, if you choose to go ahead and have independent sampling done yourself and you want to take the sample yourself, I would suggest that you become well informed about this. Mark mentioned some of the labs that there's not a lot, perhaps a dozen, maybe 15 labs in the US that are able to do this type of analysis, and I'm sure that more and more labs will do this. This is not a test like what you could do to test hardness in your water, where you just have a strip and you put a few drops of water on it. This is something that has to be processed in a laboratory and go through the appropriate steps to keep it clean all the way through. So in situations like this, there probably are those parties out there who are willing to take advantage of people's fear. But knowledge counteracts fear. If you have knowledge, you have power. So, to learn about labs that are accredited to do this type of sampling and this type of, I should say, analysis, at the PFAS website, I think that there will probably soon be an easier way to navigate to the page, but I'm going to describe it for you right now. So this is the michigan.gov/PFAS response website, and along the top banner is a link for testing and treatment. If you click on that, you will go to that page. At the bottom of that page, there is I think it's called the minimum PFAS analyte list. So it's one of those PDF files that's listed there. It's at the very bottom of that page that you go to for testing and treatment. If you click on that list, it has a list of compounds that can be a list of the different PFAS chemicals that can be tested for in different things. For instance, I mentioned fish before. We look for it in fish, we look for it in drinking water, it's often looked for in wastewater too. So you look at that, you clicked on that PDF, you got that page up. There's a table on that page that shows the list. Underneath that table, in the next section of that document, it shows a couple of links to go and check out the labs that have the accreditation. But again, it's easy to get this contaminated. So you can work with reputable environmental testing companies who may be able to take that sample for you. And that's something that, if you want to learn more about that, I would suggest that you wait after and talk with us, or you can use the 800 number that comes to the State Health Department, or talk with any of the agencies here so that you can get more information about that. I don't think we want to use up too much time on that tonight because there's a lot of different questions.
Thank you.
Is that enough, Jim?
Yep, thank you. Next question. Number 1, our well is in the affected area. We called the hotline and put our name on a list. Does this guarantee our well will be checked? And number 2, with all of the wells in the affected area, will all of the wells in the affected area be tested? What about if they're outside the 1 mile area? And number 3, can we get our wells tested ourselves?
Okay, these are very similar questions to what we just answered, but we'll go through it and emphasize it again. Is that if the wells that are in the affected area, one thing I want to come back and talk about that term, affected area. At this point in time, we have an area that we're looking at as concern. We don't know yet, and this is an important point to remember, we don't know yet when we're talking about residential wells, if they're affected. We know that the Parchment water supply wells had PFAS in them above the lifetime health advisory. It can happen. You can have a situation where a supply well may be impacted, but the residential wells in the community may not. I mean, that is a possibility. But because we don't know the answer to these questions right now, that's why on Saturday we started to test the the private drinking water wells that are in the community. We need to understand that. We need to understand that very quickly. So that is why we're doing that. So if you contacted the hotline and put your name on the list, we have that information that's provided to us, and we have people that are looking at that information. And again, we try to take a very well thought out, strategic, step-by-step process to test those wells. We will look at that location in the context of trying to get this done in an organized fashion. As we look at those, if the decision is made, again, we're expecting to receive some results next week. That will help guide our decisions. If we see your name on that and you're outside of the area that we're focused on right now, we'll contact you. So we will have a discussion so that you will, either way, we're not going to leave you out there hanging without a response. We will let you know what the intentions are, what the plans are. And there's also an 800 number. Again, I want to emphasize, if we left the door hanger and any information we've left you, there's an 800 number. Please call that number if you have questions. We will get somebody to answer those questions for you. We want you to be informed. We want you to have the information, the most information you can have.
And I think to add to that, if you feel as if you have concern with your own private residential well, nothing is hard and fast on the distribution recommendations that we talked about. So if you feel as if, geez, I'm really concerned, I don't want to drink the water, I've got my own private well, and we'll take that on a case-by-case basis. We don't want anybody walking away feeling as if they can't get access to bottled water. We'll take care of that. Just make sure that you see one of us afterwards if you're in that particular situation. We'll look at where you're at logistically from the well field, and we'll make some recommendations based upon that. Okay, so next question, please. So since PFAS can be passed through the soil, are there any plans to test and monitor soil?
Okay, right now, as I mentioned again, we have a facility that we've identified in the community where PFAS may have been used in the past. I talked about paper making as one particular use where PFAS may have been used in the past. We've located one of those facilities in Parchment, and we began testing today at one of those facilities, or at that facility. Those are groundwater samples and monitoring wells. Part of the reason we're focused on monitoring wells right now, we want to understand how the PFAS got in the Parchment supply wells. We also have, I mentioned lagoon systems and water treatment areas that were on that property. We're going to begin sampling those as well. So that is on our list of things to do, is to get out and sample that water. Again, that tells us a little bit more about that. So we're going in an organized fashion to be able to understand the likelihood. Now, when we talk about testing PFAS in soil, there's some interesting chemistry that's involved in how PFAS move. We may get to the point where we determine that testing PFAS in soil is appropriate, but right now we want to be able to understand where the stuff may come from in the groundwater. Once we start to understand that, we'll progress in our plans. So part of our thing is we want to be thinking about what we're doing next week, this week. So we want to be taking an approach to it and always looking at a proactive measure to be able to make sure the citizens in the community are protected.
Thank you. Next question. Number one, is there going to be an increase in the water bills for residents? Two, who's going to pay for all of this, including the remediation? Three, where will our water bill come from now? Do I have to pay for the water that is flushed out? And 4, who pays if people on well water have to hook up to city water?
Okay, regarding the increases in water bills, no, you shouldn't see any increases. We haven't worked out the long-term solution yet. We're going to work on that. We're trying to keep it somewhat neutral, so maybe we can even reduce the cost. But you should not see any increases in your bills. They will continue to come from the city of Parchment.
So the next question is, who's going to pay for all of this, including the remediation?
I can't answer the remediation question, but I do know that by declaring a state of local emergency, we were able to receive state funding to pay for a lot of the work that's going on at this point. I can't address that going forward. Maybe somebody else might be able to. But when we learn that information, it'll certainly be shared.
The question on remediation, we have to first understand where the PFAS is and how it became to be before we can understand that question and who's going to pay for the remediation. If we're talking about managing the risks associated with PFAS, I think some of the other questions here are probably better suited for the other panelists in here in terms of the questions about the water and what the solution may be that pays for that.
I'll take number 3. Where will the water bill come from now? And then do I have to pay for the water that was flushed out? Your water bill is going to come from the city of Parchment. Whether or not that changes would be a long-term agreement that would have to be worked out between the city of Kalamazoo and the city of Parchment. So right now we're on an interim plan, and that interim plan is that city of Parchment is in control of the system. And then do I have to pay for the water that is flushed out? The cost to flush the water out is a cost that we will be submitting under the Declaration Act. Thank you.
And then the final question, who pays if people on well water have to hook up to city water? And just a reminder that when we talk about a hookup, typically you're talking about an access line to a water main to your homes. The good news is that distribution network already exists, so that's not a cost that we have to incur. The predominant cost that we're going to encounter beyond just the response work is the actual, if this becomes a long-term solution, is the actual cost of the pumps and the utility work that's going to get the water into the existing distribution system. So I think that covers that list of questions. Next question, please. Number 1 is, what about the vegetables we have canned already? And 2, can you water your vegetable gardens? 3, can we swim in our pools? 4, how do we safely empty our swimming pools? And what about the cost of emptying and refilling them?
We do have somebody here from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development who can address questions 1 and 2. And while he's taking the mic right over here.
Hi, Brad Deacon, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And the what about my gardens question is one of those common questions that we get. There have been some studies. There needs to be a lot more about plant uptake. We know that the variety of different plants, anyone who gardens knows that plants take things up from nutrients from the soil and from the water. And that due to an abundance of caution and concern, our recommendation is that anyone who has irrigated their gardens with city water, that those fruits and vegetables not be consumed, and that even more so, and we recognize that as the farmer state agency, that is a very disappointing message to hear. But from a public health standpoint, especially if they've been canned, that is even of greater concern because of the way that most canning is done and processed. So that is our recommendation for gardens. There are other, depending on the size of your garden, there are other options possibly for the future in terms of rain barrels and those kinds of things. We've been working on that kind of issue around with conservation districts, and we'll keep having those conversations, and we'll keep trying to learn more about plant uptake so that we can give better advice in the future.
Thank you, Brad. Can we have Chris, you address question number 3, please?
Sure. This is a common question, so it's certainly people have had questions about this as far as not just swimming in your pools, but swimming in area lakes, if they're impacted, or also using your water in your home for showering or bathing. We do not find that skin cancer is a significant pathway to get into your body. So I'm not going to say that it does not cross the skin barrier, that it's a perfect barrier against it. However, it really slows things down, and the way that you're going to get PFAS that's in your water in your home into your body, the most efficient way is to drink it. And that's why we're making the recommendation not to drink it. I think that we need to turn to somebody else for answering question number 4. Is John Russell available to come up?
First of all, it's a very good question, and I haven't thought about that up to this point. I think that we can put together some guidance on what to do with swimming pool water. It's all about relative risk and the relative risk of emptying a swimming pool to the ground or to the storm sewer is relatively small. But we can put some information on the website regarding that, and I don't know what to tell you with regard to the cost of emptying and refilling them. The best choice, if we could get the swimming pools when you empty them sent to the sanitary sewer, that would be the best choice. But I don't know how practically that would work out, so that might be something we have to work out.
Regarding the cost question, that's something that we have to work out. It's not our intent to have you have to absorb that cost to refill your pool, but it's something that we're going to need to work out long term with our city staff, along with the Kalamazoo city staff, to understand how we can manage that, but it's our intent to work something out. And again, those details will be communicated to you when we know that.
Thank you. Next question. If our private well is impacted, what will happen and how will it be fixed? What and when? And the cost?
Okay, so the state health department and the local health department work together on determining what are the appropriate steps. And we also work with DEQ on this as well, to understand where things are at in the investigation, but also when we get back the private well results, we already have a plan in place for if this shows up, what are we going to do about it? So in some instances, we may see those results, they might be non-detect, which means that none of these chemicals were found in your sample. And in that case, we would not have any kind of recommendation to stop using that water for any water-related purposes. But then there might be detections in there. Maybe they will be over the EPA Lifetime Health Advisory. And then we would strongly recommend, we would advise you to not use that water for drinking or cooking, and to work with the local health department so that we can get you bottled water and then an interim filter. The filter is not meant to be for the rest of your use of that well. It's considered interim while the investigation continues, and also while the municipalities figure out what is going to be the long-term solution, whether it's the connecting up to the Kalamazoo water system, or if there are other options that they need to discuss. So that will be some of the steps that we'll be looking to take from the state and local health department side. As far as the filter is concerned, there is funding that the legislature has provided to the state So the State Health Department provides money based on a budget that the local health department gives for what they need for the filters and for staff to help with this response. Those filters are at no cost to you. So you will be receiving, if your well is impacted, you will more than likely be receiving a filter to tide you over until this fix is taken care of.
Thank you. Next question. Number one, where did the bad water go when it was flushed? Where was it drained? And number two, is it going into the river? If so, what impacts does this have on the Kalamazoo River then?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer number one, and then number two, I'm going to pass over to the DEQ, Water Resource Division if possible. We covered this in the slide, the City Council presentation. The bad water was flushed out. It went into the storm sewers. Where possible, it was then bypass pumped in our storm to sanitary sewer bypass brain. Now some of the water was direct drained into sanitary sewer. So when we dropped the tank, and the tank is 200,000 gallons, that all was captured directly and placed in the sanitary sewer. The majority of the water was sent to the sanitary sewer. When I say sanitary sewer, that means that it goes to Kalamazoo, to the wastewater treatment plant. When I say storm sewer, that is a conduit that eventually leads to the Kalamazoo River. And then for further questions about impact and covering number two, we have, yeah, thank you.
Again, I'm John Russell with the Water Resources Division. We looked at the impacts of the Kalamazoo River based on the volumes that were discharged, and our analysis showed that those would be rapidly diluted if they reach the river to less than 1 part per trillion. And that goes, I think a lot of the blow-offs and the pressure relief valves probably mixed water from Kalamazoo and Parchment, so it wasn't just all Parchment water that was being discharged in those instances that we couldn't capture everything.
Thank you. Next question. Number one, are the health effects worse if you already have an autoimmune disease, other pre-existing health concerns? And then number two, will there be a health survey to compare us with other larger communities? Any long-term health studies being performed on Parchment residents?
Okay. Would the health effects be worse if you already have some kind of health challenge? We don't even know if health effects will occur in people from this. We have information from studies about populations that have been exposed to these chemicals in water, and because these were very large populations, it was, I don't want to say easy, but they were able to detect changes in a small percentage of these people for the health effects. So it does not, this is not a predictive exercise as far as when I or one of the toxicologists in my office looks at the results from a drinking water sample, whether it's from your private well or from the public system. So as far as saying whether they can be worse, we don't know if we can't say for sure that health effects will happen. Do you want to add to that, Dr. Nettleton? Let me go into question 2, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Nettleton. So the question is, and this is a fair question, would there be a health study or a health survey to compare us with other larger communities, and any long-term health studies being performed on the Parchment residents? I think we're too early in the process to answer that question at this time. We don't have enough knowledge about the situation. We certainly have the knowledge about the public water supply, but I think that we want to get more information on the full situation and try to figure out what that means for things going on right now. and then looking at what this means or what this has meant to others, that is a question that we have to consider once we get through this first phase of the investigation. Do you have anything to add?
I agree with everything that Chris just said. We first need to determine what the exposure actually was. And to put into context the potential research or epidemiological study, that would be undertaken by scientists in the community for the benefit of others. It wouldn't necessarily benefit an individual person or an individual community. It'd be for communicating further information, just like the CA study that was performed in West Virginia informed what we know about PFAS already. It'd be for the benefit of the greater good, as opposed to the individual benefit. But the key point to remember is that we still need to first determine the exposure status. If it is determined that it is necessary to move forward with that, it would be a partnership between the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the local health authority to do a full assessment of what that could look like. But still, we are in the exposure status determination phase.
Thank you. So we are approaching, we're going to take a couple more of the written questions. Just a reminder, if you're interested in submitting a verbal question, I'd ask you to go up to one of the individuals that are holding up the yellow forms now, and we will begin the verbal question process in about 5 minutes. So let's take another question. Number one, how long does it take for the test results to come back after the water has been tested, both for Parchment's water supply and private wells?
Let's take the private test results first. So these are your drinking water wells. For people that where we've tested your drinking water wells, we requested and expect to begin to receive results next week. So we started testing your wells on Saturday. We requested and anticipate receiving results beginning next week. For Parchment's water supply wells, we started testing those Monday for PFAS. Excuse me, let me back up and clarify. Parchment's water supply system. So this is in the distribution pipes. These are the triangles I showed in the one figure. We tested those beginning Monday. We requested and expect to receive results from the laboratory at the end of this week.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do one more question, the written questions. At this point in time, if you have submitted your yellow form, and again, you are a resident that is impacted by this, you can begin to form a line on either of the microphones on the side aisles. So one final question. Number one, is it likely PFAS has been in our water for decades? Number two, how will this affect our property values? And number three, has Parchment ever been tested for PFAS before? If not, why not sooner?
Is it likely PFAS has been in our water for decades? We don't know. I mean, that's a simple answer. And it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to understand that later. We know that PFAS is in Parchment's water supply wells. We found that through the governor's initiative, through MPART, and the proactive measures that the state has taken to be able to understand public water supplies, and the community water supplies, and the schools that have their own individual well. That was the effort that went on. We wanted to understand that all community water supply systems in the state, we wanted to understand and make sure that Michigan citizens were protected. This was a proactive measure that Michigan took a leadership effort in across the nation. So that was how we found the PFAS in the Parchment system. Is it in the water for decades? And I said, we don't know. We'll be able to go back. This is part of the reason we're trying to find out where are the PFAS coming from. If we understand where the PFAS are coming from, we may be able to make some scientific interpretations to be able to make that understanding, but at this point, We just don't have the information to answer that question.
Okay, so that's going to close out this portion of our presentation and answering the written questions. Sorry. How will this affect our property values?
I'm answering the question just because I'm in the business. I'm not a house seller, but I've been in the real estate business for my whole career. The answer is, I don't know. We don't know. The market's going to dictate that. I would suspect that once the water's hooked back in place and we're hooked up to the city of Kalamazoo and that is flowing safely, that there should be minimal impact. The market's going to dictate that. And for the short term, there probably will be a psychological impact associated with that. But we don't really know. The market is going to determine that. So I guess we'll find out.
So I think too, when you think about selling a home, typically it's the seller's responsibility to some level of disclosure. So if you've got a known source of contamination, you've got lead, you've got radon, you need to disclose that information. If this goes the way that we're planning on it going, we will be able to provide a long-term permanent solution for you. And I can't emphasize the value of the proximity of Parchment's water system to the Kalamazoo water system. And I'm not saying that that's the permanent solution, although I think it very well could be. But I think that that gets us in a position where you're able to, after the system is made permanent, you're able to provide or sell a home that has potable, clean, safe water. So with that, we're going to transition. Has Parchment, one more, has Parchment ever been tested for PFAS before? If not, why hasn't it been done sooner?
We are not aware of previous PFAS testing in Parchment. Why not? The simple answer to that is it's an emerging contaminant. PFAS is a compound we're only recently learning about. This is not something that we historically understood to be an issue. And as I talked about emerging contaminants, these are contaminants that the science is not quite there yet. We're trying to do this as we progress. Why did we test it now? I think the part here is what I want to emphasize, that this was the result of the governor's initiative to form MPAR and go out in a coordinated fashion, to go out in a very proactive, very fast fashion, to be able to understand all community water supplies in the state of Michigan.
And I think it's important to remember that Michigan is actually ahead of the curve on this, and that the action that's being taken in Lansing with some of these initiatives are not happening in other parts of the country. So that's an important consideration as well. So with that, if we could have the verbal question, people start lining up, please. So just a couple of reminders. Again, we're trying to focus on the impacted residents. Make sure that you've submitted your speaker request form. Again, just a reminder, please be respectful and courteous. Each of you will have 3 minutes to ask your question or to provide your comments. So we'll go ahead with you, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Scott Markham. I am not in the affected area, but I'm right on the edge, and I have a private well. My question pertains to the paper mill specifically. I know it's not yet known if the paper mill is the cause of this contamination, but I think that's a safe assumption. That's just my personal opinion. Given the fact that the paper mill has been shuttered for 15 years or more, and there has been some remediation, I know there has to be a certain level of information, and I was wondering if the folks from EPA could maybe step up and explain to us what contamination is known at this site, and what the plan for remediation of this site was and would be moving forward, whether this was found or not, because one way or another that site has got to be cleaned up. Thank you.
Jeff Kimball come from the
Specific to that paper mill and the actions that are going now, the typical process we follow is partnering with our state agencies, and in talking with Mr. Deschamps and the other folks at DEQ, the first step is to have the locals and the state look at it. Just in the situation we're dealing here with the immediate situation. I hear what you're asking about having to look at it and the other remediation activities to date, but again, with the PFAS, it's an emerging contaminant. So the studies that have been done there may not be appropriate to answer the questions I think you're asking about it. Mark, I don't know if there's anything you want to add into that as far as existing investigations into the property or the first term plan, but what I will say is when we move forward looking at the paper mill, right now the first step is it is on most of our sites that EPA does, we coordinate, we don't step in and take over. We're going to coordinate with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality as the lead state regulatory agency of investigation, and we will coordinate with them. And with the situation that we have here with the water situation, we will offer resources if the state desires our assistance in that, and if there are ways or abilities that EPA can assist with that investigation, we certainly will. But we're going to closely coordinate with your state and with local agencies. One of the reasons we're here tonight as part of this team is because of that. We like to do these jobs as projects, not just take over. It makes it a lot more seamless if we all work on the same page. Mark, can you fill in some additional?
Yeah, I wanted to come back and just talk about some of the testing. There has been some testing done at the Crown Vantage paper mill. That's why the monitoring wells are present. That's why we have the ability to go in and collect samples from those monitor wells. Those wells were put in as part of an investigation that was done many years ago. Those wells exist. We can utilize those wells to be able to gain some information. As Mr. Kimball mentioned, PFAS was not a compound we tested for in the past. We didn't understand PFAS at that time. We still don't fully understand PFAS, but we understand a lot more today than we did 10 years ago. We understand areas where PFAS may have been used or manufactured. And because we now know about those, and we know that there are certain areas where they may be, we're beginning to look at those. So when we looked at after we got the Parchment data back on Thursday late afternoon, and we began to start to develop a plan to put into place very quickly, we looked at where might PFAS have been used or made in Parchment. We had a paper plant that was closed, and we had waste treatment areas, and we had a landfill. Those were areas that we said, these are areas where they may have been. And that is why we're focusing our work. So previous work that was done there was some contamination that was identified, but those were things like volatile organic compounds. Those were things like metals. They were not PFAS because PFAS weren't tested. And that's the part I just want to make sure, but what Mr. Kimball said, that's what we're looking at now. This is the first time we're looking at PFAS at the Crown Vantage mill.
Thank you. All right, next question over here, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Linda Merrill. I live in the Mill Park townhomes and apartments, and I am blind. I wanted to know who is going to be responsible for testing, not for testing, for flushing the site there, and do I have to do that, or will the management do that?
I can address that. Certainly, we've got a lot of public health officials that can help you with that activity. And so I would suggest that let's get your name before you leave and your address, and we'll give you our contact information, and we'll help you with that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question over here, please.
Thank you. I have a couple things to say. About the little kids that are playing in the little pools and been drinking this water their whole life, like a 2-year-old girl. What are we to expect from her drinking this water all her life? And not only that, what about people with wounds? They need water and stuff, and I personally don't think one gets water cups in the family. by the time you have 2, 3, 4 bottles to drink, we got what's left to do everything else. Got pets, got to take care of them. But something's got to be done, because I've been there 30 years. I have 4 issues that you guys mentioned on there. Don't know whether to turn that or not. Who knows? May never find out. But it's the fact that I have 4 more illnesses. That's bothersome to me. And I just hope you guys do your best to clean it up and tell us the truth and be transparent. I really hope you do. Thank you.
I just want to address the transparency issue. That's my promise to you as your health officer for this community and Kalamazoo overall, is to assure that we give you the information as quickly as we get it. Every day at 4 o'clock we release the news of the day, and we've done that for 3 or 4 days now. So that's available on the Kalamazoo County's Health and Community Services website, or I'm sorry, Facebook page. So that's as current as we get, and all of these responders and all of our partners need to upload their data at 2 o'clock each day, so that at 4 o'clock you've got the news of the day. Yeah, we're gonna remind you of website information at the end of the meeting. Sir, next question.
Sure. My name is Aaron Weineman. I live in the magic circle there with the water wells, and you said it may be as simple as putting a sponge on it, and then we'll have to go to something permanent. Problem is, we have no water main in our neighborhood anymore. Who's going to pay for all that? And is there emergency measures in place if they are contaminated? How soon are we going to get the water mains?
Sir, could you repeat the question, please?
I'm in the neighborhood just north of Parchment High School, and there are no water wells. The closest one is right there by the high school. I mean, the whole neighborhood north of us, there are no mains. So who's going to hook them up, and where are they going to put them in? It's not the city, Kalamazoo.
Right, yeah, okay. So I was trying to say that was a city question. That would be a health department question or a DQ question.
Okay, let me make sure I understand the question, because I may not have heard you clearly. You live north of Barton High School?
Yeah,
yes?
It's north of Parchment High School, in the circle, and there's all water wells.
And there's no water mains out there?
Yeah. No.
So you want to know who it would be that would have to pay if your area is affected and needs to be hooked up to city water?
That's correct. And how soon, if they are affected, how soon would it be?
Okay, so that's not a state health department question.
No.
So I will pass it to who the most appropriate person would be, and I think that would be who would be providing the water in the area. That's true. Okay, so I'm going to let Mark answer.
Sure, I'm going to give that a shot. There's a few of us that kind of overlaps in so many different areas. I think the question, sir, is what you're asking is the work that we're doing right now to understand if PFAS has impacted private drinking water wells in Parchment. We really need to see those results to be able to understand next steps and be able to understand if that area of concern and where that actual PFAS levels that may be exceeded are located. So until we understand where the PFAS is, or if it's there, it's hard to take the next steps. So we're trying to do everything systematically, but we are trying to plan ahead so we have a plan before we're at a certain point. If we speculate, which we're not going to speculate very far, if we speculate and we say, okay, if to your question, if your well was impacted with PFAS, what would happen next? I can let Christina talk about that a little bit, just to emphasize a prior response she had about filters. But in the interim, we would have to figure out what is the solution long term. So we would look at an interim measure to to be able to protect public health while we try to figure out what the long-term solution is. But there's a lot of ifs in there, sir. Their first thing is let's figure out if it's there and where it is.
Well, I understood that part. I just want to know if they were, who's going to pay for it? The homeowner?
And I can address that. Historically, for the residential wells that have been identified in Michigan that have been impacted by PFAS, the state has stepped forward with a temporary solution with a filtration unit or point source or so point of use to be able to provide, again, a short-term solution. I think that we'd have to look at the specifics as it relates to your location. How close are you to getting a network distribution system brought to you? So, I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Next question.
I also live on the north on Douglas Ave in this circle. And before I bought my house, I don't know if anybody else went out and bought the contamination booklet. And so I thought I was being proactive. So to find out tonight that I'm living a half mile from not only an 82-acre toxic waste dump that was unlined because it's old, but that also they brought the coal ash from the power companies, does anybody know that, and put that on top and then capped it. So it's unlined, so we're not only talking about these whatever PFOAs. And then I'm so appreciative of you being here helping us, I really am. But what I'm asking from all of you is we still haven't cleaned up the PCBs. We haven't, it's when are we going to learn to stop allowing these chemicals to begin with? Because even now that they're phasing out these PFOAs, there's just a new generation, Gen X, and I'm asking my elected leaders, pharmaceuticals, we check them, and then if they're safe, we allow them. Chemicals, it's the opposite. You allow them until all this Armageddon happens, 20 years of meetings and committees and cleanup. Let's just not allow them in the first place.
Next question.
You already said that the contamination is in the wells, correct?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
The contaminated water is in the wells, correct?
Go ahead.
It's in the Parchment supply wells, which have been cut off and are being flushed out.
Okay, you flushed
We do
them
not
out,
know if
but-
they are in your individual well.
Okay, the water still comes from the groundwater. Your well water comes from the ground, which is where the PFAS is, correct? So you flushing out your system, bringing the new water in, is still going to recontaminate it. The PFAS is coming from the ground.
Okay, so first and foremost, the city of Parchment wells were turned off, valves were closed, and taken offline.
So they are no longer operational, even after flushing them out through the Kalamazoo system.
Can I attempt to answer the question first, sir? So the city of Kalamazoo has wells that are located in the city of Kalamazoo that are in different aquifers. Those wells have been tested for PFAS and it range from non-detect to single digits, which is well below the 70 parts per trillion health advisory level. So that city of Kalamazoo water with non-detect is being brought in. So the Parchment wells are off, city of Kalamazoo wells are on, and the city of Kalamazoo wells that are flowing into the system.
Right, but that's temporary. What are you going to do about the Parchment wells?
So the system that we have in place that we are permitting and installed is a connection to city of Kalamazoo.
That's going to be permanent now?
That's a solution that has a couple options to it. One of those options is that the city of Kalamazoo can be a wholesale customer to Parchment. That means we sell treated water at the door. And Parchment maintains a distribution system in terms of operation, maintenance, and control. And your bill would still come from City of Parchment. The other option is that City of Kalamazoo would provide a retail service, which that we would also provide that distribution service, which is valve turning, hydrants, everything else like that, and you would get a bill from City of Kalamazoo. So those are really the two options we're looking at. I would think it would be a far shot to consider wells in City of Parchment at any point in the future, whether that's short or long. Thank you.
So if I can add to that, in the event that the option is a permanent connection to the City of Kalamazoo's water system, those three existing wells that historically have provided water for the City of Parchment would be abandoned. And they would be abandoned in accordance with the rules that are set forth by the Department of Environmental Quality. Thank you. Next question.
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm Heather. I have two boys that go to Parchment schools. So my concern is school going to be started on time? How is the food going to be prepared there for these kids? Water for sports. Is any of this any concern? Because school starts in a month. We have not heard anything about that.
I'm going to turn that over to the mayor.
I think the goal is to have everything back to normal, if you will, by the start of school. And all indications are that that's going to be the case, but until it is, bottled water is going to be supplied.
Food that's prepared?
Yes, even for it's going to be provided until the drinking water is deemed safe and by the MDEQ. But the intent is to try to have it all wrapped up before school and have the lines flushed out, etc.
I think we have the school superintendent here. So if you'd step up to a microphone, sir.
Phoning a friend, Jason.
Yeah, phone a friend, okay. If you look on the Parchment website, we just put an update on there about how we're going to be impacted, so that's really good to get that information out. When we have updates that pertain to the schools, we're going to continue to update the school site on the news feature at the bottom. If you go onto the school website now, you'll be able to see that. It's a real quick rundown of what we're doing. This is not a good time, but we are obviously not in session with students. I can talk about food preparation as the chart wells. Right away we identified the Meet Up and Eat Up summer lunch program. We were able to coordinate with them. They did make provisions, not using the water, to do their food service, which is completely off the line. And for sports, we're in our summer dead week right now, and next week we start up. So we're kind of waiting to see if the lines are going to be there. We are planning bottled water or big jugs, so we don't use a ton of plastic. And we will be on the bottled water system that's being communicated with coaches as we go through this. As far as school start and all of that, we really hope that we would be. If we're not, we will take provisions necessary. For all of the other activities that are going on, we're kind of making those decisions as we get more. But the impacted schools right now, I want to mention, are North, Central, High School, and Middle School. Northwood and Barclay are already on the Kalamazoo. So that is something we're constantly monitoring. I can tell you the communication's been fantastic. And one thing I do want to add as well is that I've been in communication with a lot of people, but making sure that we get those schools tested at the source to make sure we're free before we get the alternative for our kids.
Thank you. In addition to that, we've got, we're working in unison, the local public health department, which has food facility inspectors, have worked with your food restaurants, all 6 of them in the community. In addition, we'll be working in unison with the Department of Ag to assure that all of the food and that all of, if necessary, the bottled water is readily available and that all of the food is overseen. So we'll assure that's taken care of. Next question.
Yeah, I live down on McKinley Street, and I don't know how many know this, but the well is down on 20th Street in East Cooper. And it's not that far from the river. Also, one other question I had was, who owns the paper mill now, Crown Advantage? Does anybody know that? It's not Parchment, is it?
The owner of the former paper mill site on Parchment is owned by River Reach Partners, LLC.
Where are they at?
They're based in Denver, Colorado.
Well, they kind of went out on us, huh? They should be cleaning that up, shouldn't they? I'll have to say more than that, I guess. But the other thing is, the well is down off 20th Street. There are many streams that lead from 3 companies on Kalamazoo. One's an aluminum company, a paper company, and one mixing the iron with lights, I believe it is. Are they going to be checked out? I know, and I've heard this, probably should have said something a long time ago, I didn't, but when this come up, it made me think. The aluminum company used to dump their sludge back against the swamp area. Okay, where's that going to go? Right down through those streams. You know where the well is? Right between them. They may have been a good place to check out to see where the source is coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
My name is Holly Henderson, and I'm a resident of Parchment. I actually grew up here, and now I'm raising my children here. And I'm thankful for the panel lectures, but I wanted to address my community. A community here that we're so stressed and anxious. Y'all, we got a pamphlet about it. This is so scary. And I know that our health officials up on stage were talking about, people asked about doing a health survey. In the beginning of the night, we all raised our hands if we're in the affected area. Could you raise our hands for our health officials if you are affected by some of these things, high cholesterol, thyroid, digestive issues like colitis, hormonal deficiencies, kidney and liver disease, a suppressed immune system. Is anybody in your household been affected by cancer? Oh, this is so scary. Yeah, this is so scary, y'all. We need to really take this seriously. I mean, water is our life. This is the most sacred resource we have. If we don't have clean water, we don't have our health. If we don't have our health, we have nothing. So we need to all take this really seriously, be thankful of what our city officials have given us, the Nestle water, right? Thank you for now, but hopefully we're gonna have a really awesome long-term solution. And I appreciate everybody kind of keeping positive in this. And thank you again for this opportunity to give us all the information that you have tonight. So thank you.
Hi, my name is David Benak, and I just have a couple of thoughts and a couple of questions. If I understood correctly what the panel said, and by the way, thank you for coming here and answering questions. This is really great of you to do. But I think I heard that you said that the well water here will never be drinkable again. And maybe I'm wrong, but that would be a travesty if that were to happen. The other thing that I would like to hear you address a little bit more, because I know you mentioned it, when you flush this out, where is it going? You said down the stormwater drains. Where did those go? And then, where are we going to get help for this? We can't afford to fix this problem. Has the state declared a state of emergency? Is there any Superfund money here? How are we supposed to fix this if we can't find who's responsible and hold their feet to the fire? So, thank you.
I'll address the latter part of that question in terms of how are we going to pay for this. You know, is there a personal responsible? So in this world, typically you look for a PRP. Is there a PRP? We haven't gotten to that point in time. We're into day 5 or 6 of this incident. In terms of who's going to pay for it, we know that we've declared a state emergency, so that affords or allows for resources coming from the state. In terms of allocation or pots of money that have been set aside. for this very type of situation. So we're going to continue down that road. I don't have all of the answers to where we're going financially. We're continuing to monitor all of the costs because, quite frankly, this is time intensive. We know that retrofitting Kalamazoo system to be able to accommodate the residents and on this distribution system is going to cost a considerable amount of money as well when we're talking permanent solutions with new pumps and retrofitting and all of the time and energy and the civil engineering that goes into that. So to be continued, basically, in terms of your question about who's going to pay for this. That's all I can really say about that. All right, next question.
Hi. First of all, I would like to, I guess this is kind of a small request, but I wish that we would stop calling it an emergent contaminant because it's really not. I will tell you also, when we talk about, we don't know if there are any health effects from this. I have an almost 3-year-old daughter who's 27 pounds and she's still breastfed. So now that we've stopped drinking the water, she's still getting this PFAS through me, through this source that's supposed to be a wonderful thing for her. So, you know, I am concerned about the health effects, and there's a lot of people in here that have a lot of those health concerns. So I just ask that they not say, well, you know, we found these problems in rodents, but maybe not people, because that's usually where we get our first information. But my real question is, with this water before you dumped it, what else did you test it for? We know that you test for 8 substances as required, no more, no less. There are other areas like Kalamazoo tests for 18. I understand they're larger and that they have other concerns, but it is an industrial area. We'd like to know what funds were delegated to testing prior to this. And do you intend to do any, you know, expanded testing in the future? We don't test for hexavalent chromium. We don't test for arsenic. And I will tell you that last year, our home was one of the homes that you contracted with Carr Laboratories to have tests for lead and copper. And on their website, they specifically address PFAS and whether or not it's tested. So if anyone has any information on the scientific portion of it, can you explain to us what tentatively identified compounds are and whether or not there were any indicators prior to this that possibly the Parchment water had a high level of an unknown contaminant? I'm not looking for specific numbers or whether it was PFAS, but they say right there that any of their kits, other than just the copper and lead kit, will detect these compounds in these TIC scans at relatively high levels. They say this may actually be useful because there are cases where people are drinking these chemicals in their water at high levels, enough for this method to detect. So they basically said that their samples are analyzed by hand. Why is not the overall municipal water sample looked at by hand? Or is there possibly any reports that said we've identified something, we don't know what it is, but it's at high levels and you need to look into it? Are you going to publish the full reports that you've got? Can you tell us who's been testing our water? You know, we'd like more information on what you knew about this.
So I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Ducharme.
Your question is regarding individual wells, or are you talking about the supply wells?
The supply wells.
Amy, is that, or Heather, is that something you want to go ahead and address, please?
Good evening. My name is Heather Bishop. I'm the district supervisor for the community water supply program here in the Kalamazoo area. And I can tell you that the Safe Drinking Water Act provides provisions for required monitoring for all community water supplies in the state of Michigan. And those compounds include bacterial components, organics, inorganics, and radiological compounds. So in your question, you mentioned arsenic and chromium. Both of those items are required testing for all community water supplies in the state. And we would have any of the testing available for the city of Parchment. We could provide that information. And then also the city is required to produce each year what is called the Consumer Confidence Report. And that is required to include any detections of any required monitoring that are found in the system in the previous year. The Department of Environmental Quality.
So they don't include any of that on the Parchment website, and any of the stuff that they publish for the report, it's not on there.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear the question.
The report that you publish on the Parchment website for the water quality report, it is not included on there, correct? Because I printed that out and there's nothing about those substances that you're talking about.
If they are not reported on the consumer confidence report, then they would not be detected in the water supply. The requirement for the consumer confidence report is to report detections.
So just a reminder, all of these individuals will be sticking around tonight, so if you have some questions that you want further detail on, you would like to get their contact information, we'll be here to be able to get that to you. Thank you. Next question, ma'am?
Yes, I have a concern with the gentleman that was just over here on McKinley talking about the creeks that run to our Parchment water wells. My parents sold the land to Parchment to put the water heads on them. Since then, we have noticed nothing but contaminants coming from the Russell Street Creek. It comes from above where Napa or Sapa or Wells Aluminum, it's the aluminum factory. Several times our creek has been completely white. For a whole weekend, we never had frogs or fish, water skippers for years. But like I say, the Russell Street Creek runs right into our wellheads, and I believe it's being contaminated by the aluminum factory.
Thank you.
I'm just asking a question that didn't get answered prior for someone who handed it to me. So as far as the absorption rate, we talked about through skin and ingesting. What about through other orifices like soaking in bathtubs? So can you talk about that?
So you were asking as far as soaking in tubs? So again, I think I misspoke earlier. A couple of my colleagues pointed it out. So we would not expect. Beg your pardon? Okay, I'm sorry. I can't hear you, but I'll just. If somebody has a question further, please come up to the mic. But in regard to skin absorption in the tub, again, we would not expect that to be any kind of significant exposure there. So my toxicologists have run calculations on that based on our understanding of the science of these chemicals, and the amount that would get into your body through the skin is infinitesimally smaller than what we would expect from when it's drunk. So, so is there needing for clarification? Okay, so people are asking other routes of exposure. Yes, sir, I got that, thank you. The other routes of exposure, such as breathing it, so these do not turn into vapors like you would expect from, say, gasoline or solvents. So you would not expect them to turn into a gas, to be breathed in. People have asked about, well, what about when you're showering, because there's water droplets and you're breathing steam. Again, a very small exposure pathway, and we would not consider it to be anything like what we would expect from drinking this.
And so I was trying to be very delicate, but I mean, women in bathtubs.
Okay, so you're talking about vaginal exposure. Okay, thank you. All right, we would not expect that. I mean, you got to think about that for when you're normally soaking in the tub. You got bubble bath in there. What do you you've got to think about such things. I don't know, did you want to add anything, Dr. Hamilton?
I agree with Chris. The exposure is not significant enough to be a human health hazard. It's the ingestion, it's the swallowing of the water that is the exposure concern.
All right, folks, we're going to limit it to 2 more questions, and then we've got just some final talking points. So, sir, your next question.
Yes, I just want to thank you all for coming here and giving us all this information. My understanding is that there's still a whole lot of wait and see to go on. Is this the only meeting like this that we're going to see, or are we going to regather in a week or so and answer some more questions and see some more presentations and kind of talk about what's going to happen next?
So I'm going to conclude with just a reminder of some of the next steps that we pulled out of all of these presentations. We do anticipate that we'll have at least another subsequent town hall meeting to give you updates. I can't tell you exactly when that is. Again, to get the most current information on a daily basis, please visit the Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services Facebook, as that's going to be updated every day until we're done with this situation. And then obviously the Michigan PFAS site will be updated on a regular basis as well. We have one final question.
I just have a couple of things I want to say real quick. I represent a very wonderful man, longtime resident, passed on. His name was Clarence Roy Flynn, my grandfather. He used to tell me tales about his father, John Roy Flynn, about the paper mill and what they used to do there. It's no secret. And I'm pretty sure everybody here that lives in my neck of the woods, the old timers, will tell you the same thing. What went on over there. Basically, I want to know one thing, and I'm pretty sure everybody else here wants to know the same thing I'm going to ask. Does DEQ test for industrial waste? And two, based on what the old timers say, and only the fools don't listen to the old timers when they speak. I'm no fool. Why hasn't the old mill been knocked down by a wrecking ball right now? Yeah.
I think I caught two questions out of that. Help me if I think your first question was, do we test industrial wastewater? And the second question was, so John, if you want to get ready to step up, I'm going to so John Russell, he'll answer the first question about, do we test industrial wastewater?
Yeah, we do, and if you have any, you cannot discharge anything in waters of the state without a permit. And so you cannot discharge anything in waters of the state without a permit, and there are limits that are established based on water quality and the receiving water. And so, you know, we do aggressively test the water, and people have permits that they have to then do testing themselves. In Michigan, we are undergoing a process. We have an industrial pretreatment initiative where we are actively searching for sources of PFAS, and we have asked all the wastewater treatment plants that have industrial users in the state to begin to sample suspect users, and that would include paper mills. And Kalamazoo is a good example. They've gone through this. They've identified some sources, and they're working on eliminating or controlling them.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.
So, thank you. As I promised, Lindy, could you please put up the next steps? I just want to do a basic reminder. So just following up, I want to make sure that you walk out knowing that these are the things that we're going to be working on over the course of the next days and weeks. So first and foremost, communicate test results to the community as they are received. Continue to test the water chemistry, lead and copper, and PFAS in Parchment water well system. Flush the service lines. Develop a collaborative plan for a more robust temporary connection of the Kalamazoo water system to the Parchment water system. Test drinking water wells. Test the monitored wells. Test surface water. Remain engaged in an investigation and outreach. Provide support to state, county, and city officials. Evaluate public water data and private residential well results. As needed, work with local health department to provide PFAS-free water until the long-term solution is in place. Continue review and dissemination of the most updated health information related to PFAS in partnership with the state health department. And finally, committed to operation of water distribution center until safe drinking water is provided to residents through the municipal system. State in Michigan delivering 2 semi-trailers tomorrow, so we have a firm connection with an unending supply of distribution water. Expecting further deliveries every day. Those both the contact information. All of these continue. You can still continue to get water every day from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock at the distribution center. As school commences in a couple of weeks, if we're still in a position of having to distribute water, we'll probably relocate that distribution center. Again, all of the updates will be provided on a daily basis, and we hope to be able to have another one of these as soon as we've got additional information. Again, these representatives are going to be around, so if you've got questions that were unanswered or you want some contact information, please come and approach us, and hopefully we can provide that. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for your time tonight and your patience throughout this. It is deeply appreciated. Thank you.